Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of the material we get coming from government side as to why we shouldn't do this is really hinged upon the individual threats and efforts of these particular nations. Whether these be sketchy things Russia is doing in the war to instigate it, or whether these be Chinese political assertions that they're doing to encroach in the Philippines or in certain territorial disputes, as well as maybe these nation states trying to fearmonger and use their spheres of influence to harm these countries. We tell you that even if these things do happen, which we concede as a reality, a check and balance to prevent these things from becoming worse can actually happen on our side when they actually come together as a conglomerate, when they're no longer just China, Russia, etc., when they become this union as BRICS Plus, which my partner already told you about, is growing and ultimately therefore paves an economic interdependence and interest of nation states who seek to be a part of it. What is the main issue in this debate? All my responses will be integrated. Why should we support the growing influence of BRICS Plus or BRICS in developing world? And why does this foster economic interdependence regardless of who will be the next hegemonic world power and regardless of whether or not we're gonna see US decline as current global leader? This is an outcome-independent extension we get coming from Jared and I, exclusively from CO, that directly responds to something that our opening asserted and talked about, which is the role of the US and everything we get from government, which are individual atrocities you have from these individual nation states. A lot of what we get from opening is largely one-sided and value-neutral, simply because on government bench, we can still hold these countries individually accountable when we take a look at BRICS as a collective, as opposed to looking at these countries individually. When you're a developing country transacting or dealing with a stronger country on a unilateral basis, it becomes more difficult to hold them accountable. But when you band together under their sphere of influence as BRICS Plus, you also have the rallying power of other smaller developing nations within you to be able to hold these larger countries accountable. That's precisely where we can actually bring China to the International Criminal Court and hold them accountable for the atrocities they're doing in the West Philippine Sea, for instance, or in the Southeast China Sea. And these things are only able to happen when we actually build economic interdependence, so the other side of the party now sees stake in us, because the point in which they continue to violate on our sovereignty is a point in which they harm a potential market, a potential trade partner, and a potential economy to take part of. We think that, ladies and gentlemen, regardless of the US decline, whether that be India, Russia, and China becoming the next global power, we actually set up developing nations and set them up for economic success for the next decades. These can only happen when we actually go together and actually collaborate. Why? This can only happen if we build economic interdependence as opposed to leaving them to their own devices to figure it out, or becoming entrenched in their own local and domestic geopolitics and limit their worldview and capacity to compete and grow as an international market. What we get when you have the growing trend of BRICS, and if we support this narrative, we allow developing nations who want to opt into this a chance to be able to opt in, and in instances where they don't, it's completely fine. We're not forcing them to join our particular group, but we think that over time, they're more likely to join us, and that just snowballs into something bigger and better. Why? Because of FOMO, ladies and gentlemen. That's the reason why countries before didn't want to join, but now, when you had the advent of other countries such as Iran, the UAE, and Ethiopia now coming in, we're now able to see what we're capable of, ladies and gentlemen. That's precisely where the parallel my partner talked to you about, the OPEC countries, is very crucial and round-winning. A lot of the OPEC countries we see are less likely to go into conflict with each other precisely because of economic interdependence. The point in which they start having multilateral trade agreements is the point in which they start second-guessing maybe I'm less likely to go into war with this country. Maybe I'm less likely to intervene in their politics and do things like plant corrupt leaders or bribe certain officials because they now become a market towards my goods and services. And the point in which I start encroaching on their sovereignty, the point in which I start encroaching on their territory, is a point in which I start offending a potential market. And that becomes a race to the bottom, Mr. Speaker, and a lose-lose situation, as opposed to something which is win-win. We believe in a blue ocean strategy coming here from closing opposition, and we think that as the pie gets larger, with more countries choosing to opt in and get into it, it becomes better for everyone at the end of the day. We recognize risks, of course. Of course, things can go astray. Of course, in any kind of trade bloc or union, you're going to have countries who are the leader, countries who are more influential. But that's okay. The counterfactual is status quo when they already are super hegemonic and less likely to deal with you on a unilateral basis. So why does CEO exclusively take this debate? Firstly, we beat opening government because we flipped their case and we actually tell you why it's in the interest of these countries to form economic interdependence and how we can actually have a check and balance when we actually have this BRICS Plus as a collective, as opposed to all of these countries on an individual basis not having political or economic battering power or clamor or a capacity to do so. We beat our opening because we explained to you that regardless of US involvement, regardless of US decline, it's still in the interest of these developing countries to find new allies. It diversifies risk. It hedges the world in a sense that if things go to shit in the US, they have other people to rely on. And even if it's not China, it's not India, it's not Russia, it's not Brazil who becomes best world power, I don't know, I can't tell the future. We set them up not to be reliant on anybody. That's where we agree with closing government. But we take them out simply because they gave you no response to Jaron's horizontal and vertical material. So for all of these reasons, Mr. Speaker, if we want to set them up for success over the next decades, and if we want them to have a chance and shot to actually thrive and grow as a market, we need to side with opposition. The motion falls, and we think interdependency is the way to go. Hear, hear, thank you.